Remember this one? Woman was caught cheating with two black men. This story came in about a year after I had my channel. It ended up getting 400,000 views in the first month. He says we dated for about 2 years before we were married. She got a job as a customer service rep for AT&T, and I got a job as a truck driver, only local. I was driving trucks on and off before I got my CDL license. My dad got me into driving trucks, and for the most part, it was lucrative. As time went on, we got into a routine. I would go to work really early. I had to be out of the door by 6 a.m., and I usually got home around 5 or a little closer to 6 p.m. My wife usually got home around 6:30 or 7 p.m. Her hours were 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and sometimes an occasional Saturday. I thought it worked out great because we would basically be home around the same time, in most cases, mostly because of traffic. We usually had a routine of watching some TV shows when we got home. We did that religiously for about the first year of our marriage. Then that tapered off, and she started to get a lot of overtime at work. Well, at least that's what she told me. Those nights, she would get in much later than me. She always sent me a text or called me to let me know what was happening. I never had any trust issues with her because she always informed me. The paychecks were nice, but she was working a lot of hours, and sometimes she seemed a bit edgy when she got home. It was nothing major. I understood that her job with the overtime was stressing her out a little. I also noticed that she was on her phone a whole lot more than I remembered, and she was even on her phone while we were watching our usual TV shows. This is when the red flags start. I confronted her about it and asked why she was on her phone when we agreed not to be on our phones while we had this time together. She came back with, "It's just work." She said her boss was texting her asking things about the inventory. I believed her and I let it go. One day I was checking my bank account online and noticed a few withdrawals from our bank account in the amount of $400 each time. I asked her about these withdrawals. She said one of her friends needed to borrow the money for an emergency. I asked, "Why didn't you confer with me first? I would have done the same thing." She replied it was a one-time thing and he needed the money really quickly. He'll pay me back. Don't worry about it. I trusted her judgment, but at the same time, it made me wonder why she didn't say anything to me. I wouldn't let it go that easily. I would be finding out who this friend is. Fast forward a few weeks, I randomly checked our joint account and noticed the money she withdrew was back in the account. I was glad that was over with, but that was just the start of a much bigger issue. About 2 weeks passed, and one day I got off work early and went to get my oil changed in my pickup. After the oil change, I went to pay for it and my card was declined. I was like, what the hell? I looked at my account and there was a zero balance. So I pulled out my backup credit card and paid for the oil change. After that, I immediately called my wife and asked, "What is going on? What are you doing with our money?" She yelled at me, "I didn't do anything. It was him." My wife's friend, the one who borrowed the money from us before, needed her one more time. Weird. She promised he would pay her back in a week, and he did. She deposited the money into our account without letting me know. When she got home that day, she was acting distant. I asked her if everything was okay, but she just said she had a long day at work, so I left it at that. We did our usual routine, watched one of our TV shows, had dinner, and went to bed. The next day, I went to work, got off early, swung by my dad's house, and had a chat with him. I began telling him about the occasions when my wife took money out of our account without telling me, loaning it to a friend of hers, a person I had never met. He said, "What? What are you talking about?" I told him again that my wife had been giving her friend money without telling me, but he had paid her back both times. He said, "Son, something doesn't sound right. Why would your wife give another man money without telling you?" See, Dad is already on top of it. My dad added, "I know you want to trust her and let her make decisions, but giving another man money out of your account doesn't sound like something she should keep from you, even if he has paid you back." He said, "You need to get to the bottom of this, and quickly." After talking to my dad, I went to my wife's job. Well, guess what? She wasn't scheduled to work that day. The young man behind the counter told me to hold on, went to the back of the store, and came out with the manager. He confirmed that she was off that day. Now I was suspicious. She didn't tell me she was off today. It was a Tuesday, and she usually worked Tuesdays. I drove back home wondering what the hell was going on and why my wife wasn't telling me everything. At about 6 p.m., she came home. She had her work clothes on, and I didn't greet her. She asked me how my day was, and I said it was fine. She asked, "Can we talk for a second?" I said, "Sure." She wanted to apologize for not telling me or asking me about the money and loaning it. I simply told her I understood and left it at that. Later that evening, my wife got a phone call and ran off to the patio to talk on the phone. I could tell by the tone of her voice that something was up. I couldn't hear who she was speaking to, so I decided to go outside and find out what was going on. She immediately stopped talking as soon as she saw me and hung up the phone. I asked her, "Who was that?" She said, "Just a friend." Really? I looked at her and asked, "You mean the same friend you gave money to without telling me?" She walked away and didn't say anything else. I just couldn't understand why she had been acting so different lately. After that, I called my dad and asked him what time he would be home from work tomorrow. I told him that I wanted to come over and talk in person. The next day, I went to my dad's house and talked to him about what was going on with my wife. He said it could be a few things, but most importantly, he said to trust my gut feeling when it comes to matters like this. After talking to my dad, my gut told me I needed to dig deeper. She wasn't going to tell me, so that's what I decided to do. When I got home, I got on the computer, downloaded the phone bill, and compared the phone numbers I recognized with the numbers I had on my phone and other phone numbers I knew from my wife's side as well as mine. A couple of phone numbers didn't ring a bell, so I wrote those numbers down. Fast forward 2 weeks, nothing had really changed. My wife and I were barely spending time together, and sometimes she came home really late now, like after 11 p.m. One night I did some digging on how I could track my wife without her knowing. I came across some Apple AirTags, read up on them, and decided to give them a try. I didn't want to spend money on a private investigator. It was way too expensive for my budget. I told my dad what my plan was, and he said, "Don't drive your car. If she's doing something she's not supposed to, she's most likely aware of her surroundings." I told him I don't have any other options. I don't have time to rent one, and she's seen all of your cars. I told him I would wear a hoodie and park at a distance. So, after my wife fell asleep that night, I put an AirTag in the glove compartment of her car. I got off work early the next day to see where my wife's car was. Her car wasn't at her job. It was at some guy's house. He was an older black man. I took out my phone just in time to see them kiss. But she wasn't finished. When she left him, she went to another guy's house across town. When she greeted him at the door, she kissed him and he grabbed her behind. He also had a firearm showing out of his pants. I waited for them to go inside and then I left. I sent the photos to my father and he said, "Get your stuff out of that apartment and come over here now." When I got back home, my father was already waiting for me. We packed as much as we could and left. As soon as I got to my dad's place, I went online and opened another bank account and moved a little money over to it. I took her off all the credit cards she was an authorized user on. Unfortunately, we got married in California, and I recently found out that it's unfavorable for men. Damn right it's not. But I had a couple of things in my favor. We hadn't been married for 10 years, we didn't have kids, and we didn't have any assets together. I contacted a divorce attorney and told him we had been married for 7 years, we didn't have kids, and we didn't have any assets together. At about 10 p.m., I got a call from my wife asking where I was. She left a voicemail. I didn't return her call, and that was it. She didn't call me back or send a mountain of text messages. Fast forward about 3 weeks, my wife was served with divorce papers at her job, and now I'm just waiting for the hearing. On the day of the divorce hearing, my wife showed up with one of the men I saw her with. They were holding hands. Well, the hearing didn't go her way. If I had been married for another 2+ years to this woman, she would have cleaned me out. She didn't get anything but her car and clothes, and she could stay in the apartment if she could afford it. After the hearing, I stayed with my dad until I could find a place of my own, and I immediately changed my number so she couldn't reach out to me or any of her friends. That chapter of my life is closed. About 2 months after the divorce, I drove to my dad's place and my ex-wife was sitting on the steps. She asked if we could talk. I told her, I don't have anything to say to you. We're divorced. She said, please. I said, go ahead, say what you have to say and go. All she wanted to do was apologize. I threw my hands up and walked away from her. I was done. I never heard from her again, but I did hear she got fired from her job. One of the guys she was cheating with was arrested because he wasn't paying child support for one of his kids from a previous relationship. It's been a little over a year since this all happened. Don't get married in California. That's all I can say. Well, in my opinion, this woman, she just really didn't care. She took her husband's money and gave it to another man without telling him. Yeah, you don't do that. The most shocking thing is that whichever guy it was, they paid it back the first time. Actually, both times. What woman in her right mind would give money away from their joint account with their husband and not think their husband would have a problem with it? Really? I don't know if I could call him a fool, maybe in the beginning, but with the help of his dad, he certainly redeemed himself. Then at the divorce hearing, she showed up with one of her flings holding his hand. She had guts. That's all I got for this one, guys. But like I said, this was a classic. Until next time.